Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us. For those who don't know me, my name's Richard Betts. I'm the publisher at Real Asset Media, and we publish different magazines, different newsletters, and also run around 60 or 70 of these events a year. Looking at either hot topics or different sectors. And this one is a really interesting discussion, I think, focused on towards affordable cities. We'll be looking at that's sort of a question of affordability, both in terms of the city more broadly, but also looking at residential and affordability there as well. Super panel for you here today. Thanks very much for joining us in the RealX auditorium. You should be able to see on your right-hand side as you look at your screen, there's the Q&A and there's a chat button, so please do use these. The joy of this being live, unless you're currently watching it on demand later, but the joy of this being live is that you can ask your questions and we'll absolutely try to answer those during the session. So let's just pick up and do an introduction of the speakers. Let's start maybe with you, Scott. So just a quick introduction of yourself and also in your particular case, Stirling.
Okay, hello, I'm Councillor Scott Farmer and I'm leader of Stirling Council. Stirling is at the heart of Scotland. Many would say the jewel in the crown of Scotland's cities. The UK is top performing region for foreign direct investment outside London in 2020. It's set in a unique historic environment area that boasts stunning landscapes complemented by some of Scotland's finest countryside. It offers an exceptional quality of life, and in 2019 Stirling was ranked as Scotland's most affordable city for the 6th consecutive year. With direct access to international markets, Stirling is a place for growth through a culture of world-class innovation in a number of sectors, including aquaculture, digital technology, sport, dementia technology, and creative industries. Stirling has a strong and stable local economy with highly developed financial services, tourism and food and drink sectors, supported by a rapidly emerging digital technology sector. Stirling University Innovation Park is home to over 40 research and development businesses and is a superb example of how Stirling uses its academic strengths and supportive business infrastructure to drive business, innovation and growth.
Great. And so if you didn't know Stirling before, you certainly do know now. Thanks very much, Scott, for that. Adina, just a quick introduction of yourself and the company.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, I'm Adina David. I'm Director of Urban Living at Greystar, looking after our global strategy in the alternative rental housing space. Greystar is a fully vertically integrated real estate company that invests in, develops, and manages rental housing properties globally. We are present in over 200 markets across 16 countries where we manage and operate more than 740,000 units and beds. Our investment management platform has approximately $41 billion of AUM, including approximately $19 billion of assets under development. We're really bullish on cities, including in an urban and more suburban context, and cover the full spectrum of rental housing, including build-to-rent, student accommodation, single-family rentals, senior housing, and other emerging subsectors.
Great, thanks very much, Adina. John.
Hi, I'm John Harcourt. I'm Managing Director of Kajima Properties, which is the European real estate arm of Kajima Corporation, which is a global construction development and investment business. In the UK and Europe, we have a number of investments across all sort of city and urban uses, including offices and logistics, residential, student housing. We have a large social infrastructure investment business, investing in energy and doing regeneration. And I mean, most currently we're investing in the second phase up in Greater Manchester and helping that agenda in the UK.
And that social infrastructure side is a really important and growing area, I think, John. Adam, just coming to you, quick introduction and also for those who may not know Edinburgh, just a brief kind of introduction of the city as well.
Thanks so much. I'm Adam McVeigh. I'm leader of Edinburgh City Council, nursing a cold, very thoughtfully exported from my child's nursery. But anyway, So we'll see how long my voice lasts. I'm assuming everyone is relatively familiar with Edinburgh, but what people might not know behind the surface is the real strength of Edinburgh's economy. And obviously COVID has presented as a bit of a risk and opportunity, and to look at some of the ways we design, some of the ways we look at our city centre and bring people back, but perhaps in a slightly different way, in a slightly more sustainable way. The 3 pillars that we've built our policy agenda on as a city are obviously putting the well-being of our citizens and residents first, and looking at carbon reduction, meeting our sustainability objectives and becoming net zero by 2030, and also reducing poverty. And the poverty programme that we have is from a poverty commission with lived experience, and really pulling together the actions that we're going to need to drive poverty down and increase the ability of people to access the amazing opportunities that are in Edinburgh as one of the UK's strongest economies, and still one of the UK's strongest economies. Even yesterday there was an announcement of more jobs going into the port of Leith, in my own ward in the capital, with renewable energy being at its heart. So again, when you put poverty reduction and sustainability together, actually we found they work incredibly well together as a driven shared agenda, and that's what Edinburgh is driving forward now. So there's a huge amount of opportunity in meeting those aims and objectives, and obviously similar to Stirling, we have a very photogenic castle.
Great, thanks very much, Adam, and appreciate you struggling through the cold with 3 children myself. I've known what that's been like. Annette.
Hi, my name's Annette Simpson. I'm Director of Development and Partnerships at Legal & General Affordable Homes. Legal & General Affordable Homes was established back in 2018 with the remit to invest significant patient capital into affordable homes to increase the supply, quality and choice of affordable homes across the UK. Since being established, we have built a pipeline of over 5,000 homes, and we now have 1,000 homes in delivery, and we've invested over £1 billion. We are, in terms of our mission, we believe that everybody should have a great quality, environmentally sustainable and an affordable home from which to build a better future. And we've set ourselves a target that all the homes that we own and operate will be net zero carbon in operation by 2030. And really the customer is also at the very heart of what we do. So not only looking at the sustainability of a home, but ensuring that those homes are great quality and affordable to live in throughout the lifetime that they choose to live there. L&G Affordable sits within L&G Capital, and L&G Capital invests pension fund money into real assets like affordable housing. L&G Capital also has businesses within the modular space, so our L&G modular business, suburban build to rent, later living, our private market developer, Cllr homes, and also future cities that invest in towns and cities across the country. So we really are looking at how we can use society's capital, so the money that people invest in their pensions, to invest into our towns and cities to create great places to live and work.
Great, thanks, Annette. And I think that sort of circularity, both in terms of the capital as well as looking at the sustainability side, is a really interesting topic. Scott, I wanted to pick up with you first, if I can. If we look, I suppose, more widely at affordability, how important is this in terms of creating and maintaining a successful and, I guess, investable city for you?
Well, to me, it's critical to have the proper mix in a city. We have benefited from a town centre first approach for many years in Stirling, where we've seen many centres and town centres becoming wastelands in effect because of out-of-town retail parks. So through our planning processes, we have restrictions in place that have meant that we have maintained that good retail mix within the city centre. But also, it's looking at the 20-minute approach as well in terms of cities and how we move forward. I mean, we just need to look at how we use our buildings more innovatively and to repurpose them. So Stirling has invested in the conversion of our former public sector hub at the municipal buildings, and like Edinburgh, we've partnered up with Codebase, which has created a tech innovation hub that's proved very successful in terms of brought a significant number of new businesses and jobs to the city centre. It's created indigenous growth, which is important, which is encouraging our own entrepreneurs. And, you know, many of these businesses have had significant growth within a relatively short period of time, and we're certainly looking to grow our digital capacity because, you know, many have called that the fourth industrial revolution. And you know, through our city region deal, we're looking at Stirling, which has got a significant rural hinterland, is having digital hubs in many of our towns outside of the city as well, to create sustainable living within our rural communities, which is just as important as creating that diverse mix and innovative creativity that we can see developing within our city centre.
Yeah, that's interesting, Scott. And Annette, from your point of view, how important are things like, I mean, Scott mentions there being able to, you know, put in place things that will attract and help grow smaller businesses, entrepreneurs. You're obviously looking specifically at the affordable housing side, but how important is it for you as an investor that this is part of, I suppose, an overall plan where the city is looking at affordability more generally?
I think it's essential. I mean, just to think about what is it that makes our towns and cities great. You know, from a city, what you want to be happening is that the way that I look at it is sort of you have the infrastructure and then you've got the life and soul of the city. And when I talk about infrastructure, I mean the sort of great housing, great office space, healthcare, education, transport systems that work. But then that empathy that comes from the people and the diversity that really brings the city in a place to life, and that really is why investors want to invest in cities, because people are attracted to them because they've got a lot going on, and whether that's to live there, to work there, to shop, to spend leisure time, you know, that is really fundamentally important to create places and cities that have a lot going on where people actually want to migrate to. So for us as an investor, and not just an affordable homes investor, but an investor in towns and cities within the UK, that knowledge that it's going to attract a diverse range of people in to spend time, spend money, you know, it makes it a really sort of investable proposition. And the better a city is at doing that, and the more people want to be, obviously, more valuable the real estate is. And then that has other benefits about a more sustainable place, because people then, you know, travel less by car, then more, you know, they have got more things going on in a sort of a 20-minute radius. So for us, it's fundamentally important.
Great. And John, I just wanted to pick up with you. Do you think the focus has sharpened on this over the past few months, either given the pandemic, or maybe it's just another of those trends that's been accelerated by it? I mean, do you think it's always been a challenge both for investors and cities, I suppose?
So sorry, Rich, it being the desire to invest in cities and create sort of more sustainable and more... Yeah,
exactly, yeah.
Cities, yeah. I mean, from my point of view, I think what has happened in the last 12 months is everybody has spent a lot more time at home. And I think, you know, whether consciously or subconsciously, we've all been thinking about, you know, what makes this place I live in. Now that means it's sort of accessibility to different uses and different opportunities. And I think this might just be sort of like try thinking, but I do believe investors, policymakers, and just the general public have started to realise that, you know, it's more than just dormitory cities. Yeah, city needs to be a place where there is a circular economy, and as Annette said, has a lot more in that 20-minute radius. And I think that opportunity for investors, for everybody to sit back and reflect, has brought this to the fore. And at the same time, of course, environmental concerns have been ever present for some time now, but suddenly I do sense that 2021 has, whether that's by accident or by design, been given some impetus in the subject of sustainability and how people live and where they live. Maybe that's because of the major events going on over the next few months, but it has definitely changed for sure.
And Adam, is your sense, I mean, as a city leader, you're having to look at affordability across all of those areas, transportation costs, Annette mentioned there the 20-minute city, those kinds of things. I suppose from your point of view, do you have to see this as a whole ecosystem, or are you able to look at each separate sector and think, okay, well, I need to deal with this, I need to deal with this, or does it have to be a whole plan, I think, for the whole city?
I think you start with the person, actually, and you start with that in a concept of community. And we're trying to build a 20-minute city so that everyone has that those services that people will rely on, that support, that advice, that those opportunities within their own locality and within a shortish distance through affordable public transport. And Edinburgh is one of the most, partly because we're municipally owned, one of the most affordable public transport systems in the whole country. In Edinburgh, it's very hard to escape at a macro city policy level the issue of housing. When we start doing that, there are certain common themes, and housing is definitely one of them. Edinburgh's market is hugely successful in one sense in terms of demand, but that puts enormous pressure on house prices and rental prices, and it means people literally can be priced out of their rented accommodation from underneath their feet. We've got a range of policies to try and deal with that, bring short-term lets back into residential use, for example, where you've got residential stairs in the city centre and increasingly actually throughout the city, bring them back into residential and try and deal with those demand and supply issues which are causing some of that inflation. We have a 20,000 affordable homes building aspiration. That's with our partners in housing associations to try and get that stock to the size that it needs to be in Edinburgh. We've been a hugely economically successful city, and it's caused a whole range of issues. So Edinburgh's number of social homes as a proportion of our housing market is far lower than the rest of the country, and that's because while there were still the same number built historically, when policies were changed in the 80s and people could buy, people did buy in Edinburgh, and it meant that our housing stock, our social housing stock, is hugely depleted. Now we're trying to build that up. We've never built more council homes than we're building right now, certainly for generations. So we're trying to restore that in a very macro city context. So while we need to look at it from the individual in terms of what they're living, what they're experiencing, and try and make sure that the component parts of city living are accessible and affordable to them through maximising their income, through ensuring there's no physical or geographic or economic or social barriers to their participation in that. It is about looking at those very specific things where there are common themes, and housing in Edinburgh's context is an obvious one. We need more affordable homes. We're building thousands of them. We need thousands more.
And in terms of your point of view, Adina, when you're looking at, let's say when you're looking at a city, what are the key things that you're looking for when you're deciding to make an investment? Is it demand? Is it, what are the key things that you're looking at?
Sure. So it does depend a little bit on product type. And of course, we want to build housing that is at the highest level of quality and livability, and will be really attractive to renters for a long time as we do manage these properties long term. Because we operate in so many markets, it really depends on what we need to be kind of bringing forward in that particular market. But for cities and from an affordability standpoint, we have been looking at some of the emerging sectors in this space, especially to address a need for affordability for your more middle income earners, especially and in cities, you have a lot of single person households, and there really isn't a fit for purpose product that's kind of developed at scale. So we have been looking to those markets that and cities that have policies that support developing that type of product. But we do believe that there are many cities that could benefit from a more diversified offering in the housing space, and looking at the design of the units and the shared spaces of the buildings, as well as what you're providing beyond that on your ground floor, and how else you're activating the community and engaging with the community. I think all of those elements come into play, but being able to diversify housing and going into cities that support that offering is really important to us.
I think that's a really interesting point around the diversity of I suppose, the types of product, because affordability can mean different things to different people. Scott, I just wanted to come to you. Obviously, it requires private money in some ways to be able to drive this affordability side forward, particularly when we're looking at the demand for housing. We're looking in this to look at towards affordable cities. So, Scott, what is it that you're looking for as a council leader, I suppose, from investors and developers? What is it that you need from them, I suppose?
Well, it's in terms of working in partnership, I think, is critical. I mean, what we are looking for is, as Adam said, it's looking at from the person, looking at the 20-minute neighbourhoods, looking at that diversity. But as Adina pointed out, it's creating the opportunities for the private sector to look innovatively at different tenures and different types of housing and living, that we can attract that investment in order to do that. But I think what's critically important to this is how we adapt and we make it easy or easier in terms of the regulatory framework that house builders have to work through. So that's building standards, that's planning, and it's in an old city like Stirling and Edinburgh, it's also listed building consents, etc. So we have to make sure that we have like a one-stop shop approach where we can be open and we can be put forward the line that we are open for business in terms of attracting that inward investment for socially affordable housing. But right at the base of this, we've got the local development plan, and we've also got master planning, because what a developer needs to know as well is that we have got the ambition, but we've also got the clear vision of what we are looking for our city and how it's going to develop. So if you've got that clear vision, then that certainly sets out the parameters where we can build more positive relationships with people that are here to invest in potential more affordable housing, for example. So I would say that the issue of looking at housing needs is important. So it's looking at it, as Adam said, from the person, from what is the actual housing needs. So we do a Honda, which is not a Japanese manufacturer, by the way. Is a housing needs demand assessment. So that looks at what type of tenures we need to meet the needs of our citizens. And if we've got that clear data, and we've got that clear vision, and we've got that clear ambition, working constructively with the private sector creates that dynamic that can enable that private investment to become a reality and the outcome to become a reality, because we are, as authorities, enablers to enable the private sector to obviously to make money, but also to invest in more sustainable outcomes for them as well.
I think Scott's nailed it on the head there. You mentioned, Scott, the word partnership, and whenever we approach and discuss opportunities with local authorities and public sector bodies, there is quite often the forms of two camps. There's the partnership approach, which is, we have to invest in our cities because we are the council. You don't have to. You're the investor, but let's try and enable it. And again, Scott, you use the word enabling, and that does make it work, because I mean, up in Rochdale is a really good example. This is not in the housing, although we are now on phase 2 and putting together a building, 250 houses. But we had a town centre regeneration scheme that was, frankly, not able to be realised using private money. Local authority had a long-term ambition, had a long-term plan, had a strategy for the town centre. So we're able to then implement a funding package that allowed them to come and sit between us and themselves and bring in third-party money. And there's an arbitrage between a public or a government body or a quasi-government body long-term income and the open market, and utilising some great private sector skills, but using the public sector covenant, the public sector sort of bankability is a great way to achieve a lot. And we're doing it again now with housing. And I think everyone in this room or screen or whatever you want to call it, I think the key thing is here is patient capital, long-term capital. There are a lot of people out there that want short-term returns, and that's fine. But where you have an objective, an ESG objective or a long-term return objective, you want evergreen income. And evergreen income really isn't, someone who wants to move every 6 months because of a job or other reasons. It's people that live and work and have to stay in a city, but where they can't afford to do so, there's a problem. So there's this wonderful sort of quite furtive gap, which I think everyone in this call would agree is a great place to be, where we can seek to fund those gaps together using public and private money.
And absolutely.
Provide opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that where we can, as a public authority, actually pump prime developments through investment is an important aspect of making these investment proposals become a reality.
And I would add to that, so far also using council assets to enable development to come forward. So that's one of the things that L&G do a lot, and we do it specifically on the affordable home side, is that the best authorities to work for are those with a clear vision, a clear set of objectives, very clear what they want to get out of a site. And then we work together to bring in our sort of development expertise and our balance sheet and our funding to then enable more homes to be delivered on council-owned assets. So again, for us, it's about, as John and Scott have said, it's about a clear vision, partnership working, and just being clear about what each side wants to get out of the partnership.
It's interesting because affordable. We use this word affordable housing, capital A, capital H, but actually sometimes it's not about registered providers and council homes, but it's about housing that is just simply affordable to aspirational teachers, nurses, doctors, whatever. I mean, you look back 30, 40 years, and the biggest house in the town was owned by the doctor. Now you don't find that anymore, and it's about creating just quality and. I mean, Rochdale, for example, we're not building, these are private rented homes. They're not registered provider homes or council homes, but they will just be of a quality in a new town centre, with a new hotel, with a new shopping centre, which is 95% let, believe it that or not, and a new council building. And that circular economy, going back to some of Annette's earlier comments, that itself is about regeneration and affordability, and then the aim or the aspirations that then spurs it on. We will see. I mean, this is not a short-term game, that's for sure.
Affordability for one is not necessarily affordability for another. So if we're talking about social housing, I mean, I've heard some individuals talk about affordable housing, and it's like 140k or what, and upwards. And to me, that's not affordable housing for the citizens that I'm representing, for example. But again, it's getting that 10-year mix, isn't it? That's important.
Relativity, Scott, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Adam, I just wanted to come to you on, because a lot of the time when we're talking about particularly affordable housing and delivering that, it's often about new build, those kinds of things. But for a city like Scotland, how practical is that? Because a lot of the city is not development sites. It's real estate that's already there, in a way, buildings that are already there. So how practical is that sort of transformation thing? And does that then impact a bit on the planning? I mean, I'll touch on planning in a minute, but.
Well, obviously they're very linked in terms of how that plan is set out. We'll bring forward our next version from our choices document to our city plan later in the year. It's a challenge. Edinburgh isn't in the fortunate, in a sense, position that Glasgow is, and that it has a lot of brownfield sites within the city in urban context where there are amenities that are already there, where there's a public transport infrastructure, where there's a huge amount of development. Although I'm sure if Councillor Aitken was here, who's the leader of Glasgow, she would talk about the infrastructure that was enabled through the city deal to enable some of those large brownfield developments to come through. So Edinburgh's in a different place, partly because our land value is much higher. But in saying that, there are still substantial bits of development to unlock. So one of the biggest sites in Europe being taken forward right now is Edinburgh's waterfront at Granton. Now there is some conversion, there are some industrial uses to some of those spaces, but they're not generating the substantial economic output that we need that can be placed somewhere else in the city. So we've outlined and set out a master plan for that entire area, one of the biggest developments, as I say, happening anywhere in Europe, led by an agenda of affordable housing, but obviously with the requirement for mix, because we can't build homogeneously. We have to build affordable along with social, along with private purchase, along with private rented. It's that mix that really builds the community that we want. And so planning obviously has a role to play in that and making sure that we've developed that. I would say, looking at the different shape of the city centre in terms of retail, which there may well be shift, we've already relaxed our planning regulations to cater for that, so that when we have a change, major department store in Edinburgh just a few years ago went bust, and within a very short space of time, Diageo was making plans for the Johnny Walker site in the west end of Princess Street, and that will be open fairly soon, I think. Be a great attraction, great use of the space. So the competing factors for some of that high-end retail space, which may shift, is less likely to be housing and affordable housing. Everyone accepts that. But it's more likely to be diversions of uses that still keeps our city centre that animated space. But in terms of delivering affordable homes right across the city, there's no shortage. There's still plenty of opportunity in the east, north, south and west, and some of that may require some affordable homes going on what is currently virgin land, particularly in areas like the southwest, where they do need affordable housing in areas where traditionally supply of affordable homes has been fairly limited. So it's about a mix in setting out that plan. And I see in cities the scale of Edinburgh, even with the challenges of land supply and land cost, which are not insignificant in a city like Edinburgh, I don't think any of these challenges are insurmountable.
Okay, good. And Adina, I just wanted to come to you. feel free to pick up any of those points, and particularly as an investor and developer, what you look for when you're looking at cities. But also Greystar obviously active not just in the UK but across Europe as well. So do feel free to share also any insights you've got from your experience in other jurisdictions, whether that's the US or whether it's Europe as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, great points have been raised. I think there's a lot that overlaps in what we do, and there's a lot more that we could do together. And I think you and I, Richard, have previously discussed about how important it is to have real transparency or clarity when working with cities in what is expected in terms of the affordable housing provision and how that sits alongside the private rented sector, and how we can kind of better deliver better outcomes together. I gave an example previously, I think, to you in our discussion of New York being very prescriptive in how they approach affordable housing. So if you're a developer of multifamily housing or build to rent here, you have a very standardized requirement if you will, if you want to deliver multifamily in New York City, and that is 20%, and it has very precise calculations around what the income profile of that resident is and what rents you could charge. So all developers in the city know exactly what they're getting themselves into, and I think, and it's a very clear process in terms of obtaining building permits and getting the planning kind of consented, or the equivalent of getting planning consented. Whereas in other markets, and I know London quite well, it's a bit of an unknown, a big unknown in some cases, and there's still a lot of debate around definitions of various things, including the affordable piece, and what rents you're expecting, what the cap rates should be, what the operating margin should be. And it puts you in a very gray area as a developer. It makes you a little less competitive, makes the process a lot more sluggish. So it delays delivery of everything. And I think another thing that could help, especially now I'm looking more in the shared living space, which kind of falls under the urban living umbrella for my strategy. And that is emerging, but we know the expectation is, for example, a payment to the council in lieu of providing on-site affordable housing. And that's great, but it would be even better if, we knew exactly kind of what that should be and what that will contribute to, so we can help support that even in a better, bigger way as we're going and acquiring these sites. So I think, and I'm not expecting a solution, tomorrow, but I think the more we can move towards a transparency and kind of standardizing that process, streamlining it a little bit more, if you will, I think it will help everyone deliver more and that diversity of housing too.
I think this is a really important point. Sorry, it's that certainty point from an investment perspective, and knowing exactly what the policy regime you are working against or with, and the timing and just how long these larger sort of regeneration projects in town centres and city centres take. And I think that is quite off-putting to a lot of people that want to invest in some of our towns and cities, because it's just there are too many unknowns and risks. So I think the ask from the investor side is definitely around that sort of clarity of purpose and sort of some certainty around policy and programme. John, do you can?
Sorry, Annette, I didn't interrupt you. But I was pretty much going to say the same thing, but also it'll be interesting to see how the planning white paper does evolve and the implications of that. I mean, already now the changes into use classes order from strict retail and office uses into a far more sort of slightly opaque, well, opaque is the wrong word, but a less prescriptive use is quite interesting because it does allow flexibility and therefore to adopt the best use. But whenever one is investing huge amounts of money, that's fine for the existing estate, but when one is investing huge amounts of capital over a long period of time, you don't know how long it's going to take to even get planning, and yet even when you get planning, you may get an appeal or the other way around. You may have to go to appeal, which is probably even a bigger dread. And taking out the NIMBYism and the sort of the slightly sort of quotidian objections to some planning will be a big relief, I think, to affordability, because we can do lots of things for affordability, but supply and delivery is probably the biggest one of the biggest challenges, and that does impact it. And
again, this is an important point because just from a house building side of things, the number of SMEs that are building houses is greatly reduced from where it was sort of 15, 20 years ago. And one of the reasons for that is barriers to entry and the high cost of moving sites forward. So, that whole viability side, the quantum of investment that's required right up front is really stopping a lot of new entrants coming into the market and delivering new homes and office space, etc. So it's a really, really important point, I think. So it's in order to get the supply increasing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got a couple of questions that have come in. Thanks, Massey and Dan, for these. Let's come to yours first, Massey. So what do you see as the role of housing associations and how can they best partner with institutions? And Massey mentions L&G and others. But does anybody have a kind of view on that? Annette, do you want to pick up the point about associations and how they can partner?
Yeah, certainly. So, whilst Legal and General Affordable Homes is a registered provider, actually we do a lot of partnership working. And, there is a huge affordable housing issue within the UK, as we know. There's something like 1.2 million people are on the housing waiting lists. We really need to be building 145,000 new affordable homes every year. And we're currently building about 50,000. This is in England, by the way, not including Scotland and Wales. So the supply issue is a real issue, and actually you do need private sector money coming into the industry to fill that gap. And what we're finding is actually when we partner with housing associations, it actually enables the housing association to do more. So we really do see ourselves, whilst we are undertaking our own investment in our own affordable home sites, the actual ability for us to also enable our partners through housing associations to do more, because essentially one of the limiting factors from a housing association is that capital and the amount of money that they've got to invest. So if we can partner, bring some expertise, utilise, work with housing associations that already quite often have a large development pipeline, it means that we can enable them to bring homes and projects forward quicker and then recycle their cash to move on to the next project. So actually we're a really big fan of actually what we can do as an organisation to enable housing associations to do more.
I'd just add to that, Annette, that from our point of view, we invest in lots of different sectors in lots of different countries, and so we always look at the cost of capital and we compare these things. And the big challenge with delivering affordable homes and delivering for housing associations is that the margins become quite slim. Now, the margins being slim is not a problem in itself, but what we then look for is ways to de-risk that. What we feel we are very good at is the development and the expertise to get to the point where there is a finished product, but also the risk capital and the working capital up front. But if we can de-risk that at an early stage in the process, for example, at the point where we're securing sites and we can secure the sell or whatever to the housing association, that means that we've de-risked that, we're getting a return, we're taking construction risk and other risks that we're comfortable with, but it means that the lower margins that that might look less favourable when compared with something else become not a problem, because profit is because of risk, and if we can take elements of risk out, then we can reduce the profitability, and that's I think that's, profit is not a bad word. I mean, it's what allows us to then continue to reinvest and do more things. So I think everyone would agree. I think everyone agrees on the call here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as strategic housing authorities, as local authorities, housing associations play a critical role in the mix. I mean, we have two housing associations specific to Stirling. We have Forth and we have rural Stirling, which obviously by its very nature specialises in housing provision in our rural hinterland. So it's important where we can match up with potential private investors to add value, if you like, to what, especially with a small housing association, they may not have the initial capacity to deliver. So it's through, as an enabler, actually being that honest broker, if you like, in terms of having that clarity, but working in partnership with the private sector in order to assist our housing associations to actually deliver the outcomes that they're looking for.
Great. I've got a question that's come in also from Dan Innes. Dan, thanks very much for joining us. What's the panel's view on generation rent? And in that context, how cities define affordable? Affordable to buy or affordable to rent? Each have significant advantages for the consumer today. Is the future build to rent? Question. So I don't know who wants to start or pick up on that.
Go on, Richard. I'll have a crack. I have a 15-year-old daughter who keeps renting things on her phone, apps and things. So I know what generation rent's about. I think there is the UK is slightly peculiar. I think almost certainly in Europe that it is obsessed with buying homes. Now, nothing wrong with that. But the younger generations are more comfortable, as we all know, with renting their music and renting their services, and perhaps homes becomes part of that. I mean, I think the big challenge with renting homes traditionally has been that the quality of the landlord has been probably the biggest issue, whereas with all the parties here approaching this from an institutional point of view and an evergreen long-term point of view, it allows for stability. I mean, for example, someone who's rented in the past might be worried about being turfed out of the home at 6 or 3 months' notice. Now, because the landlord would only give them a 6-month or a 12-month contract. Whereas, I mean, Annette, or Adina, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but if someone said, look, I want to take on a 5-year lease on a traditional basis with sort of guaranteed sort of inflationary increases or something, it probably fits in with the profile that you could work something around. So, I mean, for me, affordable is more to do with the availability for the market. Whether someone wants to rent or buy is sort of up to them. But I think, until we get away from your home as your repository of your riches, I think we're never going to get away from constantly inflating house prices, and therefore renting is probably a better way to try to manage that.
I can jump in a little bit with some figures as well from our research team, courtesy of our research team. Apparently in the UK, the projection is that the rented sector will increase by about 500,000 in the next 3 years. And across Europe, rental housing may overtake owner occupation by 2024. Now, I know there are certain markets across Europe that are already kind of disproportionately skewed towards the renter side. But I do think that some rental product can enable you to eventually, save up and get on the housing ladder if that's important. But I do agree that there is a lot of choice in the rented sector, and more choice coming that is fit for purpose, built for purpose, for changing needs. So I think generation rent is here to stay, and I agree with you, John. The sharing economy, it has led to a drive for convenience and flexibility and instant access to things. So we're looking to incorporate a lot of that in our product and make it super easy to move in, super easy to plug into the community, get to know your neighbors. It makes for a really enjoyable living experience that, you might not get if you're, especially a single person living in the city, versus moving into a house on your own, or in a community that's not as activated. So I think there's additional value and perks that come with renting from professionally managed communities.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think, just going back to the sort of one of the first points that we were discussing around the importance of having diverse cities to attract people that really create the life and of a place. And for that, you've got to have a different range of product from a housing perspective. And rental plays a really key part of that, because at the end of the day, cities attract young people. And so there does need to be a housing option. And so I think, you do have to consider, the different types of housing that's on offer, whether that is affordable rent, whether that is renting on the open market, going into shared ownership, which is the part rent, part ownership model, and then you've got your open market sale. Towns and cities need to be thinking about all of those different product types to ensure that they're able to attract lots of different people to live in cities.
Yeah, and also it's interesting because rental allows people to move between the bands very, very easily.
Yeah.
You mentioned about people moving up into, from a one bedroom into a two bedroom when they have their first child, or want to move into something a bit more with a bit more greenery, and this enables that. And perhaps one of the problems, like all good stats, it's made up, but on the spot. But perhaps one of the issues is that people do, when they buy a house, the cost, the emotional and the financial capital required to do that is so straining that they then don't want to move out of it, and then it sort of creates a barrier in that market. And encouraging communities to constantly change and evolve. Housing built for sort of two people might house four people because they can't afford to move, whereas renting allows that community to naturally regenerate and bring in a new bunch of young people and keeps it fresh. And I think that's a fantastic thing for cities.
I think sorry, Adam. I think we need to look at the differentiation between a registered social landlord and your private landlords, where there is some landlords who have a very bad reputation, and again it's building in that quality and that protection for people as they go forward. It was interesting about the question coming up about affordability and affordable housing, and as I pointed out earlier to John, what's affordable to one isn't necessarily affordable to the other. But again, it's looking at data and it's looking at understanding your communities, and it's like Adam was saying, having the pen, taking it down to the person, if you like, and it's to look at the wage structures and the local economy to see, well, what is the wage structure, and therefore what is affordable for the local communities you're trying to serve. So it's using data intelligently, and in order to provide housing that actually fits demand, and you don't end up in a position where you have local people that can't actually maintain to stay in their own communities because they're priced out the market. So there's interventions there that can be positive, and I'm very conscious that over-regulation can also be a major inhibitor to investment as well.
And Adam, you wanted to come back in on that as well. So
obviously the way we're looking at affordable housing is very much through a rental prism in Edinburgh. The rental market is significant. There's a very significant proportion of the market that is sort of privately owned and very traditionally 1-2 flats, and it's tied to people's future planning with their own pension, and it's the flat they had at Edinburgh when they were at university kind of thing model, and that's a huge proportion of our market, actually, very unusually, I suppose, in a city context. I would say, though, I don't quite build to rent. I think is a helpful inclusion into the market. I think it does provide something different. It does speak to some of those different kind of more, dare I say, modern ways of living for someone that will be living in Edinburgh one year and then get a promotion and go live in Paris the next year, etc., etc. What that's not addressing is what we've seen of people when they outgrow a property in the rental market, try and get a family property in the rental market a few years later and not managing to keep pace. Their income in that situation will not have kept pace with the pace of inflation in the rental market, and therefore they're caught in quite a difficult position. So we have to look at this, again, going back to my thing of from the person, again, how we're looking at it in policy is far less about the purchase market. We're relying on government policies like Help to Buy, for example, to try and even that playing field out a bit and try and meet some of those additional pressures that the inflation on the house price market, again, is far exceeding the ability of people to pay. But rental has to be looked at in a more kind of stable way. And if we can get that whole life cycle right, where somebody can have a property affordable within their means in their 20s as they grow up and have families and that sort of thing, get a property that keeps pace with that. But that's not what we're seeing in a city like Edinburgh with such acute housing issues and such high demand pressure. What we're seeing is people try and move out into more suitable accommodation and not being able to because the inflation in the market. So it's all about housing supply. If we get the housing supply right, whether it's build to rent or build to sell or build to do something else, as long as we build, it's all housing supply going in the right direction, helping suppress that sometimes quite rampant inflation within the market, and that helps everybody. It helps those looking to buy, it helps those looking to rent, and it helps, I think, even those landlords investing, property investors invest in the market because there's more stability and security and less fear about spikes and troughs in the market.
And I'm aware that there's sort of about 4 minutes left. I've got a quick question I wanted to come to from Jen MacArthur. Thanks very much, Jen, for this, which is, what are the panel's view on making cities affordable for small businesses? And in this particular case, Jen is talking about versus the costs involved in solely trading online. So a slightly move around back to where we were at the beginning in a way, but does anybody have a view on that in terms of trying to make affordability for small businesses especially?
Sorry, Adam, you go.
Well, I think, and for us, it's been about space, actually. It's been about premises. And obviously Scottish Government policy on small business bonus has been absolutely essential. The grants through COVID have been absolutely essential in supporting those traders. But in terms of cost of space, and we've looked as a council at cost of space for our hospitality sector. So if, as you'll see when you're walking around Edinburgh, if anyone's lucky enough to be doing so anytime soon, you'll see the pop-up space that our bars, restaurants, cafes are using on street. As the weather's getting better, and I'm hearing slight tipper-tatter of rain on my ceiling right now, but as the weather gets better, and even when not, people are sitting outside and enjoying that, and it's massively having an impact. Just in a COVID context, hospitality businesses, which are overwhelmingly small independent retailers and businesses within traders and businesses within Edinburgh, are really struggling. The number of covers they're able to provide are significantly reduced, and by providing that outdoor space, waiving fees that we would normally have for it in terms of occupied licenses and car park space generation, revenue displacement charges and all that kind of stuff, we've waived them, we've helped those businesses expand, and hopefully that's going to help them get through the next couple of months and build a sustainable, thriving future going forward. There's a huge amount more I could say about a host of other things, but it's particularly urgent in terms of the COVID context. I just wanted to
No, that's great. Thanks very much, Adam. And Jen, I'm sure we will cover that again because we'll be looking at retail, e-commerce, the crossover of that particularly, and small businesses, and particularly small retail businesses, how we come out of that crisis. We've got about a minute and a half left, so just a quick final one for everybody. Looking at opportunities, so where do you see the key opportunities now and in the next 5 years in terms of either investment or I suppose transforming towards affordable cities? Should we start with you, Annette, there?
I mean, from our perspective, we see a real opportunity in the continued long-term investment in affordable housing across the UK. But also, we haven't talked about it much, but also from a sustainability perspective, those investors that are able to offer really environmentally friendly and sustainable homes and buildings for long-term investment. You know, that having investments that are related back to social impact, I think is a real opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I was going to say sustainability is probably the key to sort of your maintaining at least or growing value, and then over the coming sort of 20 years.
I think we've got a great opportunity as we're coming out the pandemic to see new opportunities of working, new life balances, and looking at sustainability opportunities as we go forward.
Great, Adam.
I've not got much more to add, but I suppose one of the things is that kind of get it done attitude that we've all had over the last 18 months. And whether it's private, public, third sector, it's been really refreshing for everyone just to come to the table, look at the outcome and try and find a way forward, and hopefully we don't lose that.
Great, thanks very much. Adina.
I'm most excited about, I think we discussed it briefly earlier, mixed use, incorporating some of the, and this will address the previous question, but incorporating some space for small businesses, entrepreneurs, folks working flexibly within our residential buildings, as well as the retail as well. But we look to deliver housing for everyone, so every market will be attractive to us.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks very much to all of our speakers. Really interesting to get your insights on this important topic, I think. Thank you also for all of your questions. You can connect with one another as well. So if you click on the people button, you can actually text one another, communicate, or even do video calls. So that's available to you after this session finishes. We've also got investing in cities with a purpose, creating net zero urban centres, picking up. That's coming up later on in June on the 15th. So do also register for that one if that area is of interest. Thanks again to everybody for joining us. Do feel free to visit the exhibition as well on your way out. Take a look at that. Thanks very much. We'll produce some news items around this, and if there were colleagues who or industry contacts who would have wanted to have watched this or you thought could benefit from, it will also be available on demand, probably in the next couple of hours, but I'll send a note to everybody just to let you know when that's available. In the meantime, if you could join me in thanking the speakers, that would be great. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you, everybody.